What's up, guys? It is the Coaster Battleman here, bringing you an awesome top 10, the top 10 aerodynamics loopers that are still standing. These are coasters that are still operating. I might do a countdown on aero loopers that are not operating anymore or have been rebuilt maybe in the next video, but these are the top 10 aero loopers still standing in the USA. Number 10 are your traditional corkscrew models. These coasters, they're only in versions of the double corkscrew, but these coasters are kind of small and they don't have a good capacity. I noticed that at Corkscrew at Michigan's Adventure. The capacity and the operations weren't good on it, as there was only one train, so that did affect capacity. But this coaster is okay, actually, in my opinion. I got to ride it quite a few times when I was at Michigan's Adventure, the corkscrew model. It has your standard drop and then a nice turn into the double corkscrew, then you turn again and then hit the brakes. Kind of a standard layout, but it's still a decent ride, just a little too much headbanging. Number 9 is your standard loop and corkscrew models, but I could also put Corkscrew at Cedar Point into this category. However, Corkscrew at Cedar Point has a bit of a longer layout than your standard loop and corkscrew model. These rides have your standard vertical loop and then you turn into the double corkscrew. These rides are like these rides such as Demon at the Great Escape. They're exactly like Corkscrew at Michigan's Adventure. All they have is your standard vertical loop though, which is a few extra seconds to the ride. After that lift hill, you go into the drop, your standard vertical loop, then a double corkscrew. But Corkscrew at Cedar Point, you have an airtime hill, then a vertical loop, then you turn into the double corkscrew, then you hit the brakes. So overall, these coasters aren't the longest rides out there, but they aren't the worst rides, they're just okay. But number 8 is a pretty rough coaster, but it has a better layout than any of these other coasters on this list, Anaconda. This coaster has a solid vertical loop. The double corkscrew seems pretty bad, and there's also a sidewinder element. This coaster is actually kind of similar to Ninja at Six Flags St. Louis, a rough Vekoma coaster, but was designed by Aerodynamics. But looking to Anaconda, this coaster has a nice color scheme, goes through the water, it's over the water actually. It has some okay turns. The double corkscrew the vertical loop's definitely the best part of Anaconda. Double corkscrew and the sidewinder are also okay. I feel like the rest of the ride is just a bunch of random turns that aren't that good, so that's why it's at number 8. Number 7 is Viper at Six Flags Magic Mountain. When it comes to layout and size of this ride, this coaster is excellent. This coaster is excellent in stats, and it has 7 inversions, and it's the largest aero looper still standing, and it's so similar to 2 other aero loopers that are no longer operating. But the problem with this coaster is it's unbearably rough. The inversions look very fun, but the Batwing looks brutal. The double corkscrew, just your standard double corkscrew. The loops look pretty brutal. Like the first loop definitely looks pretty bad, but some of the inversions just don't look that good on this ride, while some actually look pretty fun. Like the second and third loop look very fun, the double corkscrew is good, but then the other 3 inversions kind of stink and drop isn't that good either. Number 6 is another aero looper, Carolina Cyclone at Carowinds. Layout based, this coaster is just okay with your traditional vertical loop and your double corkscrew. It's just your standard aero layout. I feel like this coaster just has your traditional aerodynamics layout, but the 2 loops are known for being fairly intense on this ride compared to other aero loopers have intense loops, but these 2 loops look fairly intense and bring you some nice G-force. The double corkscrew is very fun. Overall, I just love the inversions on Carolina Cyclone, and the drop is kind of small. I feel like other than the loops and the double corkscrew, this coaster is just okay. Now we're getting into some pretty good aero loopers here. Number 5 is Viper at Darien Lake. This coaster was the first coaster to feature 5 inversions, and it has an amazing first vertical loop after that large first drop. You go through a tunnel. There's a bat wing right after the vertical loop that looks pretty fun. The double corkscrew looks pretty fun. This coaster is basically a miniature version of Vortex at Kings Island. It has one less loop. It's not as tall or as fast, but it has some fun elements, and it's fairly smooth for an aero coaster in my opinion. I'm not really sure if this coaster is fairly smooth, but it seems like it in the POVs. Number 4 is Demon at Six Flags Great America. This is actually one of the more unique aero loopers out there, because you go under these caves when you go through some of the inversions. Before the double corkscrew, you go through a tunnel. Right after the vertical loop, the two loops, you go through a tunnel. You go through a tunnel before you go to the lift hill. There's just tons of tunnels on this ride, which is pretty cool. The color scheme really needs some work, but this coaster has some nice elements. The two loops are definitely the best part about this ride, while the double corkscrew could be a bit rattly. Number 3 is one aero looper that really I am a big fan of. Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Loch Ness Monster, this coaster, is actually very fun in my opinion. The drop is okay. The drop into the vertical loop is okay. The two loops are definitely the best part of this ride, but this coaster is known for being one of the smoothest aerodynamics custom loopers in the world. It's considered the second smoothest, which is amazing. This coaster, inversions is lacking. I wish there were some more inversions on this coaster, like maybe a third or fourth vertical loop or the double corkscrew. But the two interlocking loops are very fun. You go through a tunnel. There's 2 lift hills. This is just one masterpiece of a coaster that was built in the 1970s. Number 2, it was a coaster built in the 1980s. Vortex at Kings Island. I am a very big fan of Vortex and considered it one of the better coasters at Kings Island. Definitely, probably my 6th favorite at Kings Island, because this coaster is very large for an aero looper. The 2 loops are very fun. The double corkscrew is amazing. The bat wing is fun. I feel like just this ride in general is just pure fun. The 2 loops have some nice G-forces. And overall, Vortex, very fun coaster. Definitely one of the best coasters at Kings Island. Not as good as Diamondback, Beast, or Banshee, but still good. But number 1 is Tennessee Tornado at Dollywood. Probably not as good as Lightning Rod, but this coaster was built by Alan Schilke, a legend among coasters. He has built all of the RMCs. But speaking of Tennessee Tornado, this coaster has a very large vertical loop, a Sidewinder, and another extra vertical loop. There's some intense turns on this ride. The drop is intense. This is just one intense aero looper that was built differently compared to the other aero loopers that I talked about on this list, like Viper at Magic Mountain. I feel like the ride was executed very good. In Tennessee Tornado, solid inversions, even though there's only 3 inversions and it's not too long of a ride, but this coaster makes up for it with its intensity and great G-forces, and overall it's a very good coaster. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more videos.